Lesson 2-7, the real number system. So in this video, we're going to review the subsets of real numbers, be able to identify numbers as which numbers subset they are for real numbers, then be able to order them from largest to smallest or smallest to largest. And then finally, we will want to find the midpoint or the average, the midpoint of two real numbers. So first off, let's go through some vocabulary. When they talk about subsets of real numbers, they're referring to natural, which is our counting numbers, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and so on. Whole numbers is all the natural numbers, but including 0, so 0, 1, 2, 3, and so forth. Integers are positive and negative whole numbers, including the 0. And then we have rational and irrational. Just remember, rational numbers can be written as fractions or decimals that end or repeat. Irrational numbers are decimals that never repeat and they never end. Then we're going to look at midpoint. Midpoint is just a halfway point between 2 points on a line. And we're going to look at density property of real numbers, where it just states that there are infinite number of numbers between two real numbers. And if they are saying find a certain amount of numbers in between these 2 points, you could use that property to find them. Otherwise, we're going to look at some examples down below. We have 4 different kinds of numbers here. We want to identify which subset of real numbers they would be a part of. Now I have 0.10110111 ... That ellipsis at the end means it continues. Now there is a pattern here. It has a 1, then a 0, then 2 1s, then a 0, 3 1s. The next one would be a 0. But because there's nothing that repeats in the same pattern over and over, this would be considered an irrational number. Next one is the square root of 6. Radical is irrational, because if you were to put that on your calculator, it's going to give you a decimal that never ends. -2. -2 is an integer. And because it's an integer, it's also rational, because I can write that as a fraction. It would just be -2 over 1. And then 1.1, this would be a rational number. And it's a rational number because it's a terminating decimal. And I could put that as a fraction as well. It's not an integer because it's not a whole number, because it's part of a whole. And because if it's not an integer, it can't be a whole number. And if it's not a whole number, it's not going to be a natural number either. First couple problems here, we're going to order these numbers from least to greatest. Now it may help to put them all in the same kind of format. So maybe this would be better if you put it as fractions, or you could put it as decimals. We know that 3.14, the pi is 3.14. -3/4 would be -0.75. We got 3, and then square root of a negative square root of 8. Well, the square root of 4 is 2, and the square root of 9 is 3. So it has to be closer to 3, but it can't be more than 3. So it'd be more than 2.5. So this would be, I'm just going to estimate that to be like let's just say 2.7. Now, if you want to know what the exact would be, you just take your calculator and do negative square root of 8, and that's going to give us -2.82. So -2.8, we can put that as our answer here. So let me erase that 7 here and just make that -2.8. Then we got -3, and then this is a positive 1.5. So from least to greatest. So the least one's the smallest number. It would be in the negatives, and -3 is the furthest one away from 0 to the left. So -3 would be first. Then we would have negative square root of 8, because that was negative 2.8. Next, we would have our next negative number, which was negative 3/4. And you notice I'm putting them in the same form that they gave us in the problem. And I just use these other formats to help me determine the order. And then after negative 3/4 would give us be 1.5. And then after 1.5, we would have 3. And then the biggest number would actually be pi, because that's more than 3. Last couple problems, we're going to estimate the distance between pi and negative square root of 8. Now for this, to estimate the distance between them, we're going to have to do a little bit of rounding. So we already know that 3.14, we're going to say this is about 3. And this is about a negative 2.8. So if I'm going to find the difference between those, I'm going to subtract the difference between them. So if I subtract a negative, I'm really adding. So this would be about 5.8. So the distance would be roughly about 5.8. Now, if I rounded the negative square root of 8 to the nearest whole number, or nearest integer, then that would be a negative 3, and you would say it's about 6 steps away from each other. By the way, 5.8 would be good. And the last one, estimate the distance between 2.56 and 1.5. So if we were going to find the distance, the distance between those two, 1.5 is 1.5. So if I were to find the difference, I would just take 5.256 minus 1.5. Here would be 6, here would be 5. 12 minus 5 is 7, and you would get 3. So again, this was the exact answer, but if we're estimating, this would be about 5, and 1.5 would be about 2. So we would say it's about 3, the distance from there. Now, if we were to find the midpoint between these two, the midpoint, we would have to add the two numbers. So I would have to take 5.256, add 1.5 to it, and then divide by 2. So I'm going to put down, this is the midpoint. And then we're going to grab my calculator here. And so we have 5.256. We're going to be adding 1.5 to it. That gives us 6.756. Divide that by 2. And that gives us an answer of 3.378. And that would be the midpoint between those 2 points there. Now, if we did that for pi and negative 8, let's just do that on our calculators here. So we're going to put pi in there. So second caret symbol, put the pi plus negative square root of 8. Hit enter and then divide that by 2. The midpoint for that would be roughly 0.16. Or if you put it to the nearest tenth, it would be 0.2. But that is our lesson on real numbers.